a little bit of time in 2 Kings chapter 23, and then we'll make a quick trip over to 2 Chronicles. And the reason we want to do that is a lot of times you have overlapping information, and sometimes one of the accounts will give you a little bit more detail on a particular thing. It is that way regarding Josiah. In chapter 23 of 2 Kings, we have a pretty extensive list of things that Josiah did as reforms to get the people back where they needed to be. And in the 2 Kings reference, there's only a little bit of information about how he reinstituted the Passover. But in 2 Chronicles, there's quite a bit more information about the Passover and what he did there. So we're going to kind of divide our time. First bit of it, we'll talk about some of the reforms that Josiah instituted and why, and some lessons we can learn out of that. And then we'll switch over, if we have time, to the Passover, and we'll go to the 2 Chronicles reference for that. So when you talk about chapter 23, it kind of divides really into just three main sections, at least for our purposes tonight. The first one is the first paragraph. Josiah in 2 Kings 23, by the way, does anybody's Bible have a heading there? First paragraph, chapter 23, anybody have a heading? Restores true worship. Anybody have anything else? Josiah's covenant. Okay. What Josiah does before he begins to get rid of things is he establishes who he is and what he's going to do as a king. And he wants the people to understand that as well. He stops for a minute and he says, okay, let's get some things straight about who we are and what we're going to do. And so in verse 1, the king sent and they gathered to him all the elders of Judah and Jerusalem. The king went up to the house of the Lord. All the men of Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem were with him, the priests and the prophets, and everybody's there. Verse 3. The king stood by the pillar and made a covenant before the Lord to walk after the Lord and to keep his commandments and his testimonies and his statutes with all his heart, with all his soul, to carry out the words of the covenant that are written in this book. And all the people entered into the covenant. So, before he really gets going on major changes, the way it's recorded for us here in 2 Kings, he gathers everybody together and he says, now let's just remember who we are and what we're doing. And I love the idea of the people then and us today, every now and then, kind of coming together and saying, let's remember who we are and what we're doing. We have made a covenant with the Lord. True? Okay? We have made a covenant. We were baptized into Christ. Therefore, we have, as Paul told the Galatians, put on Christ. We have become His. We've clothed ourselves with Him. We've chosen to do that. And we did that publicly. That wasn't something that was done quietly that we kind of hid. We did that publicly. That's who we've chosen to be. And it's good for us every now and then to say publicly. That's what we're trying to accomplish. We don't, quote, go to church. We're Christians. That's who we are. And so I want you to think about this idea of standing up and entering into this agreement. And there's two things said about him regarding what he's going to do. He's going to keep the commandments and testimonies and statutes, and he's going to carry out the covenant that's written down. He's going to do personally what he's supposed to do in his life. He's going to order his life the way God wants it ordered, and then he's going to carry out God's wishes. So could we say that same thing? That we're going to do as Christians what we're supposed to do in our personal lives. We're going to order our personal lives the way they're supposed to be, and then we're going to carry out His mission for His people today. Could we say that? How would you describe His mission today? Is His mission for us to come to the church building? Is that the thing God has for us? Yeah. We're to seek and save the lost like Jesus did. We're to spread the gospel. That's what we're supposed to be all about. Is part of that responsibility overall carried out by coming to the building from time to time? Absolutely. But the building is not the work. And we really need to get that in our minds. It doesn't minimize matters of attendance at all. In fact, it actually encourages attendance because what we're trying to do is take the gospel out of here. If I'm not exposed to the gospel on a regular basis, I'm not going to be good at taking the gospel to someone else. If I'm not forced from time to time by circumstances like this to stand up and be counted as a Christian, I'm not going to do a very good job of being a Christian out in the world. And all that we do here is connected with what we're supposed to be doing everywhere else. And I like the fact that Josiah stood up and said, here's who we are. And all the people said, yeah, that is who we are. It kind of reminds us of when Joshua stood up and said, what? As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Now, he said that after he said, choose for yourself this day. You have to make a choice. I've made my choice. What Josiah is saying. I've made my choice. Now, you've got to make your choice. And all the people back in Joshua's time, what did they say when Joshua said, you've got to choose? What did the people say? We will serve the Lord. That's what they said, just like the people here said. They said, we will serve the Lord. But what did Joshua say back to them? Hold on. What did Joshua say back to them? Hold on. What did Joshua say back to them? I don't think you will. I don't think you're going to do it. And that is one of the saddest statements in the text. When a big group of people, followers of God, say, we're going to do it. And their leader says, no, you're not. Why would he say that? Talk about a downer. I mean, he got them all worked up. He got them excited. We're going to serve God. Yippee, let's go. No, you're not going to do it. Why would he say that to them? Yes.
He's been all along the way. He watched a whole generation, with the exception of two families, die in the wilderness because they couldn't do it.
Well, rephrase that. Because they couldn't do it or because they wouldn't do it? Okay. He knew their history. He knew their older history, and he really knew their recent history. Was Joshua saying, no, you're not going to serve the Lord because you people just don't have the ability to serve the Lord? Did they have the ability to serve the Lord? Would the Lord have commanded them to serve Him if they couldn't serve Him? He would not. He did command them, so they could have. What he was saying is, the mindset you have right now is not going to get the job done. The attitude you have right now is not going to work. The way you're approaching this right now is not going to work. You can't serve the Lord that is in your current circumstance. It's kind of like what the Hebrew writer said in chapter 10 when he said it's a terrifying thing to fall into the hands of a living God. That doesn't match very well with our attitude of we want to fall into the hands of the living God. Do we not? We do, don't we? We want to go be with the Lord, right? Yes? Somebody say yes. We really do want to be with the Lord. But what the Hebrew writer is saying is, in a state of rebellion, you don't want to go there. What Joshua's saying is, with the attitude you currently have, and the outlook you currently have, you can't serve the Lord. With the attitude. But if you can change that, if you'll fix that, then you can. And it seems like what we have here in 2 Kings 23 is Josiah is saying to them, your mind is getting there. You're on the right road. You're moving in the right direction. We're going to make this covenant. But then immediately after that, it begins a section that begins in verse 4 and goes all the way down to verse 20. And it is about the reforms that he instituted. One of the things that leadership does, whether it's you expressing or exerting leadership in your own life, or whether it is some group or individual leading you along. One of the things leadership does is it gets rid of the things that you don't need. It gets rid of the things that are in the way. It gets rid of the problems. Leadership gets rid of the things that are holding us back. You think about it, if you have your Bible, turn with me real quickly over to Hebrews chapter 12. Hebrews chapter 12. You'll see this in what the Hebrew writer said in chapter 12. Verse 1 of chapter 12. He references chapter 11 and all those people who were faithful to God. And he says in verse 1 of chapter 12, therefore, since we have so great a cloud of witnesses surrounding us, that is, the people in chapter 11, let us also, listen to it, lay aside every encumbrance or weight and the sin which so easily entangles us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us. What he says is, let's get rid of the things that are holding us back. Let's get rid of the problems that are in our lives. Whether it's personal leadership, that's you taking control of your personal Christianity, or whether it's the collective, leadership says, get rid of the things that aren't working, that are weighing us down, that are opposed to God, that are keeping us from being what we ought to be. Get rid of them. We have heard entire sermons about things that we have to get rid of. Whole sermons about how we have to get Well, honestly, bad influences out of our lives. Sometimes when people weigh us down and direct us in the wrong way and tempt us with things that shouldn't even be on our radar, we have to get rid of those influences. Sometimes it's things that we have to get rid of. Sometimes it's as simple as we've got to stop watching the news. We've got to stop watching certain TV programs. We've got to stop watching movies. We've got to get rid of some things. On Apple Music the other day, I was looking for a particular song, a particular group and a song. And so I went to the main page of Apple Music. This is a little sidebar, by the way. And I happened to notice that I didn't recognize anyone or anything there on the main page. None of the groups, none of the individuals, none of the songs. And then I noticed something else. I don't know what your music arrangement looks like, but I noticed that there is this little red E on virtually all of the number one or top songs today and on virtually all of the new albums. Anybody know what the little red E means? Explicit. Yeah. It wasn't on a couple of songs. It wasn't like, out of the top 100 there were 3 songs that had an E. No, it was out of the top 100 there's like 90-something that have an E. And I don't know, I realize I'm getting a little bit older. I'm still pretty young, but I'm getting a little bit older. And maybe I'm just missing something. But I thought that was crazy. I brought home an album, a CD, years ago from the J. Giles Band, and my mom made me throw it in the trash. I mean, literally in the trash. No refund, no nothing, throw it in the trash. Sometimes leadership makes us get rid of things. That's what you see with Josiah. Josiah says there's a lot of stuff here that's got to go. I doubt everybody was happy about that. Probably not. Doesn't make any difference. Whether it's your personal leadership of your life, or whether it's a collective with your family, or whether it's a group like this, or really, honestly, whether it's a group at work or anything else. Sometimes we have to look around and say, there are things weighing us down and holding us back. There are encumbrances, and we've got to get rid of them. So, look at your Bible. He commanded Hilkiah the high priest and the priests and the doorkeepers to bring out of the temple all the vessels that were made for Baal. Doesn't that sound really fascinating to you? That in God's temple there were vessels made for another god. We've seen it before. We see it again here. It's confirmed for us here. And so he burned them outside Jerusalem in the fields and carried their ashes to Bethel. That's a pretty big statement. He's burning them in Jerusalem, but he's taking the ashes way up north to Bethel. We're going to get these way out of here. By the way, Bethel comes up a little bit later because Bethel was one of the sites Jeroboam set up to do bad things, to worship the Lord in ways that they weren't instructed. And so over and over again, verse 6, he burned things. He broke down in verse 7 the houses of the male cult prostitutes. We're not going to say a whole lot about that except, man, all kinds of things he got rid of. Verse 10, he got rid of the altar where children were offered as sacrifices. He did away with the horses, which the first part of that verse sounds weird in verse 11. He did away with the horses which the kings of Judah had given to the sun at the entrance of the house of the Lord by the chamber of an official. They gave horses to the sun. They were worshiping all sorts of things and in all sorts of ways. He smashed things down in verse 12 that Manasseh had built. He broke in pieces, verse 14, the pillars that were filled and filled them with human bones. He just kept going. And I'll tell you, there is no mention of it, but I just wonder if at some of these sites where he sent people to destroy these things, I just wonder if there wasn't a little ruckus, a little brouhaha at some of these places where people were mad about it. Some people probably made their living serving in some of these places, at some of these altars. And Josiah said, we're just not going to do it. Verse 15, furthermore, the altar that was at Bethel in the high place which Jeroboam made Israel sin, even that he broke down, and he demolished its stones and ground them into dust. He just flat got rid of the things they didn't need. Now, tell me again, what's the prominent feature about Josiah when we see him first in the text? What's the first thing that jumps out at you about King Josiah? He's young. He's young. Sometimes we talk ourselves into believing that, all of the wisdom is held by older folks. There's a lot. Especially here, there's a lot. But age does not automatically or in every case mean wisdom. Sometimes the young folks have it right. Here, he did. And more than likely, some of the folks who were mad at him and against him were older folks. Now, don't misunderstand me. We benefit greatly by the experience and wisdom of older Christians. No question about that. And older people generally in our communities. But don't ever think that the young folks among us don't have something to offer. They surely do. And Josiah is a great example of that. Verse 20 wraps it up. All the priests of the high places who were there, he slaughtered on the altars and burned human bones on them. And then he returned to Jerusalem. Finished big, didn't he? Leadership has to get rid of things. And it is really good for us, personally and collectively, to take a look and say, what do we need to get rid of? What's got to go? In order for us to be faithful, in order for us to do what God has asked us to do, in order for us to serve one another, what needs to go? And whatever it is, let's just tear it down and tear it into pieces. Take it outside and burn it. That'd be fine. Drive and drop the ashes somewhere way far away. Because what that symbolizes is, I'm not going back to it. When we put to death the things that are causing problems, listen, they don't rise again. If they rise again, we didn't what? We didn't put them to death. We didn't destroy them. We didn't get rid of them. It's really, really easy for us as Christians to just kind of push the things that are getting in our way aside, knowing that we can get back to them if we really want to. Sometimes we have to get rid of things. It may be your phone that you need to get rid of. It may be your television. It may be somebody. So be it. Josiah really gives us a good example. Beginning in verse 21 down through verse 27, it talks about the Passover. We're going to flip back to 2 Chronicles now. Flip over to 2 Chronicles 35. 2 Chronicles 35. We're going to look at the Chronicles record regarding the Passover. We have probably more to say about the Passover than we can get to this evening. But I want you to think about the significance of what's recorded in 2 Chronicles. It's not just a few verses. In 2 Chronicles, it begins like this in verse 1. Then Josiah celebrated the Passover to the Lord in Jerusalem, and they slaughtered the Passover animals on the 14th day of the first month. And then it goes into all of the detail, all of the things that he did. Verse 4, prepare yourselves by your father's households and your divisions, according to the writing of David, king of Israel, according to the writing of his son Solomon. In other words, there's some things written down that tell us how to do this, and I want you all to go get ready and do this. I want you to prepare yourselves to do this. Verse 6, now slaughter the Passover animals, sanctify yourselves, and prepare for your brethren to do according to the word of the Lord by Moses. There's things that are going to be done, and you need to prepare yourselves and the people for the things we're going to do. Now, hold on to that for just a minute. What in the world is the Passover, and why are we talking about it here? Somebody tell me that really quickly. What's the Passover? Why? One of the three feast days. Why is the Passover significant? What's the big deal about the Passover? Okay, you remember back in Exodus when we're about to leave, Exodus chapter 12, we're trying to get out of Egypt. And before we get out of Egypt, we celebrate the Passover. And one of the things that comes out of the Passover is the blood. And one of the things that's important that night is that the blood be where? On the doorpost and the lintel, because why? The angel of death, the destroyer, is coming. That? Yeah. The firstborn are going to die. But if there's blood on the doorpost of the lintel, you're okay. The Passover is the thing instituted about that. And we talked timing last week a little bit, so let's go back in our minds. The Exodus, let's just say around 1445 BC, ballpark, 1445 BC, 1400, 1450, somewhere in there. When are we talking about with Josiah? We did it last week. Generally, when are we talking about? Yeah, 630, 620, somewhere along in there. And then we can go down a little bit further as things go on, and we will as we proceed through 2 Chronicles and 2 Kings. So we're talking about 620, 630. So it's been a few hundred years. It's been a few hundred years. Skip down to verse 18 in chapter 35. Chapter 18 of verse 35. That's chapter, I didn't say that right. Verse 18, chapter 35. It'll be easier to find that way. Verse 18 of chapter 35 of 2 Chronicles. It says, there had not been celebrated a Passover like it in Israel since the days of Samuel the prophet, nor had any of the kings of Israel celebrated such a Passover as Josiah did with the priests, the Levites, all Judah and Israel who were present, and the inhabitants of Jerusalem. Josiah read the book of the law of the Lord. He understood that there were things that we should be doing that we weren't doing. And so he said, okay, first of all, we're going to get rid of the bad stuff. We're going to get rid of the bad. We did that. Now we're going to get back to doing what we're supposed to do. Now we're going to get back to celebrating the Passover, the thing that got us to where we are. They would not be in the Promised Land had they not left Egypt. They left Egypt under the Passover circumstance. That's what God gave them to get out of Egypt. It was a really big deal. Do you read about the Passover in the New Testament? Oh, absolutely you do. It was one thing that God wanted marked. And one of the reasons is the Passover, way back over in Exodus chapter 12, has a bit of foreshadowing regarding whom? Jesus. Yeah. Exodus 12 and Jesus. Jesus is referred to as our what? Our Passover lamb. Yeah, he is our Passover. And so this is not one of those things that, just nobody really cares about. This is big. And Josiah got it. If you look back at your text, it says, Josiah contributed to the people, all who were present, flocks and lambs and young goats for all the Passover offerings, numbering 30,000, plus 3,000 bulls from the king's possession. His officers contributed 2,600 from the flock and 300 bulls. Others contributed, officers of the Levites contributed 5,000 from the flocks and 500 bulls. I don't know what it is like to see 37,600 animals from the flock sacrificed in a short amount of time, or really 3,800 bulls. I don't know what that's like. I've never seen that. But I bet you that was something. It kind of reminds us of when Solomon dedicated the temple. One of those moments in history. And so the writer here, both in the 2 Kings reference and in the Chronicles reference, says there has not been celebrated a Passover like this in our history. No one has brought it all together like this. Josiah did it. And he did it according to the word of the Lord. That's what's interesting. When you read through the whole thing, we don't have the time to do it. When you read through the whole thing, look at verse 12. They did it as it is written in the book of Moses. Verse 13, they roasted the Passover animals on the fire according to the ordinances. They did it the way they were supposed to do it. And that's really a remarkable thing, because in a short period of time, with a very young king, they have rallied everybody together and brought everybody back to where they needed to be. Yes, sir.
Do you think that the word in verse 13 leads to James makes the wonder that do you suppose that the cattle were a sin offering, that the lambs and the goats were the Passover?
Yes.
The cattle were not
Yes.
appropriate for that, because the reason why I say that, they divided the meat
Yes.
among the laypersons. So it's either an atoning sacrifice or it's a sacrifice for sin. We've not been keeping the law. We're going to keep the law, but along with that, includes some self-star worship from the standpoint of an atoning sacrifice for us not keeping the Passover.
Very good. They offered the bulls, which were not a part of the Passover arrangement. They offered the bulls more than likely as an atoning sin offering. Then when you get down to verse 14, afterwards they prepared for themselves and for the priests, because the priests, sons of Aaron, were offering the burnt offerings. So they even did it right after they roasted the animals. They went on to the next section, which was now you feed the priest and so on. And so they put all that together, and they did it the way it was supposed to be done. Verse 16, so all the service of the Lord was prepared on that day to celebrate the Passover and to offer burnt offerings on the altar of the Lord according to the commandment of King Josiah. They all got it and they all did it. One guy, one king. Over and over and over again, we have seen this king rose up and he did evil in the sight of the Lord. This next one came up and he did more evil in the sight of the Lord, and so on and so forth. One guy said, nope, we're going to remove the bad stuff and we're going to restore the right stuff. Let's go. Now, we've got just a few minutes. Here's what I want you to start thinking about, just for a minute with me. Would it be possible for us to use our observance of our Passover lamb as we partake of the Lord's Supper on the Lord's Day? Would it be possible for us to use that moment to remove the bad stuff, make a commitment to removing the bad, the things that have to go, the things that are weighing us down, to remove that and to restore the good? Because of what we're observing, because of the significance of what we're observing, because Jesus is our Passover. You think we could get that out of the supper? What are we supposed to do, according to the Apostle Paul in 2 Corinthians 11? What are we supposed to do during the Lord's Supper? Examine ourselves, okay? And when Jesus tells us to observe the Passover, we're supposed to do what? It starts with an R, R-E-M, remember. Yeah, we do it to remember. And we do it by examining ourselves. I'm not big on this idea of examine myself. I didn't have a good week spiritually, so I can't take of the supper. I'm not big on that idea, because examine yourself is not offered to us as an excuse to get out of taking the supper. It's a command that we do as we take the supper. And so part of our self-examination very well could be, could it not? How am I doing getting rid of the things that are weighing me down spiritually, the things that need to go, and how well am I doing at restoring in my life the things that need to be present? As we're thinking about the most important thing in history, as we're thinking about what Jesus, our Passover Lamb, has done for us, as we're really in that moment, as we examine ourselves, shouldn't there be some point to it? Some outcome from having self-examined in that moment as we're observing what Jesus did for us? And it seems like what you have here with Josiah is a really good model for us to consider, collectively and individually. Because the whole thing starts with him standing up saying, we are doing this, aren't we? We are going to be God's people, aren't we? Okay, now let's examine ourselves. And let's remove the things that are holding us back and making it harder in our spiritual lives. And let's restore to our lives the good things of God, the good people of God, and build from that moment. Think about that. From the moment of the supper, we build a new life. What if we did that every week? What if our examine yourself, our self-examination was not, am I a good Christian? But what if it was more like, how have I done? What do I need to get rid of? And what do I need to add in order to be what I'm supposed to be in view of the sacrifice of Jesus, God's Son? Is there room for improvement there, you think? For us personally, individually, is there room to improve? You know, sometimes we talk about the supper and how much time we spend on it. You know, we want to spend more time. We want to spend this time. The time is really not the thing, although it can matter, but it's not the thing. The thing is, what do I do from that moment of self-examination and observing the supper? What do I do from that moment on until the next first day of the week? What do I do with the supper? Just like, what do we do with the Passover? We've celebrated the Passover like nobody's ever celebrated it before. We've done things nobody's ever done. We've made such a big deal about the Passover like no one else ever has. Do you think they thought about that from that moment on? Do you think that was supposed to be in their mind? And then when it comes around the next time, which for them would be what? The next year. When it comes around the next time, don't we remember what we did? The significance of that? And how we were all involved. We were doing it together. We were committing to the Lord again. It is a great big blessing that we don't have to wait a year. On the first day of the week, we come together to break bread, and we can remember. We can self-examine. We can commit to restoring what needs to be restored and removing what needs to be removed. If we take advantage of the supper that way, we won't find ourselves going, well, what are we going to do here? I just ate this, but what am I supposed to do for the next 35 seconds? We won't have that problem. We won't have that problem. And you may not have that problem. But sometimes I don't focus like I should. Sometimes I'm distracted by things that shouldn't distract me. Because the self-examination is too surface. It's too light. It needs to be deeper. It needs to have action attached to it. What do I need to get rid of? And what do I need to add? If that's my observance of the supper, then I'm doing something that has results attached to it. And I'm convinced that that's what this means. You do it in remembrance of me. Not so you walk around for a couple of minutes afterwards going, I remember Jesus. But so you walk around saying, I'm changing my life because I remember Jesus. I'm changing my habits because I remember Jesus. I'm changing my associations because I remember Jesus. I'm changing my entertainment because I remember Jesus. I'm changing my speech because I remember Jesus. We can do that. And to me, this section in 2 Chronicles and 2 Kings about Josiah is just yelling that at us. Yes, sir.
A couple of things.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's probably highly likely, because of the timeline, that this is the last time to Passover. I don't know that for certain, but the way it reads the Chronicles, Josiah dies in the battle of Beer-Necco, and then
Things change rapidly.
Two, it's interesting that Samuel is mentioned in regard to the observance. You'll remember Samuel's concern when the children of Israel wanted a king. God's words to him were, they're not rejecting you, they're rejecting me. And so the Passover was last observed in the proper fashion when God was king over Israel and Samuel was his first.
Very good, very good. The last really good Passover, if you can say it like that, most probably was right before Israel got themselves a king. That's really a good point. So, Lord willing, Sunday morning, we'll come together at 9:30. By the way, Cannon's going to speak for us at 9:30 Sunday morning. And then we'll have Bible class. Randy will be in here, Joey will be over there. We'll have classes for the kids. And then we'll come together in here. And if the Lord wills, we'll observe the supper. That's what we'll do. And we will have a great opportunity to examine ourselves as we do that and to remove the things that are hurting us and to restore the things that make us what God wants us to be and then keep that rolling. Hopefully that'll work for us. Thank you for participating.